Hello my dears. So it's been a while since I've spoken about my favourite royal runaways, but Prince Harry's recent BBC interview stunned me so much that I just had to talk about it. Within this interview, Harry radiates delusion and entitlement. And I can't lie to you, a part of me does feel sorry for him just simply because he is so lacking in self-awareness. He has no idea, at least it seems this way anyway within the interview, he has no idea what he's done wrong, and he doesn't seem to understand why he's experiencing the consequences that he's experiencing. And I don't know, I just feel sorry for anyone who's that lacking in self-awareness because it's got to be quite a hard life. In case you forgot, him and his wife have basically built most of their money since leaving the country on dishing out information and airing out the dirty laundry of Harry's family. Not only that, but it seemed very clear that they were trying to take down the monarchy. Meghan herself even mocked the monarchy and the very concepts and the traditions that come with being part of a royal family member or meeting the royal family member and all this kind of stuff. And yet despite all of this, despite their attitude, mainly Meghan's attitudes towards the monarchy, they still are very determined to experience all of the benefits that come with being working royals. Whether it's Meghan demanding that her friends address her as Sussex, as opposed to calling her Meghan Markle.
I don't think anyone in the world knows that Meghan Markle has eaten Jack in the Box and loves it.
It's so funny, too, that you keep saying Meghan Markle. You know I'm Sussex now.
Which is bizarre because Sussex is not a surname, you know, it's not a name, it's a title. For someone who doesn't like the royal family, doesn't like the whole concept of royalty, thinks it's all a bit silly, seems very, very adamant to cling on to those titles and also plaster them all over their projects. And then Harry, on the other hand, is also someone who also has criticised being part of a royal, said it's not something he really wanted, it's kind of forced upon him because he was born into it, etc, etc. Yet he still wants to enjoy the benefits of being a royal, such as having us taxpayers pay for his security, which is kind of how we got here and how we got to this BBC interview in the first place. So Prince Harry lost his court appeal to keep the same level of security that he had when he was a working royal, as the judges basically ruled that he was no longer entitled to this security because of the fact that he had decided to step down from his royal duties. So what this essentially means is that if Harry wants to have security, he can have it, he just has to arrange it himself, and he also has to pay for it himself. This is a privilege that was revoked from the pair when he and Meghan stepped down and decided they no longer wanted to fulfill their royal duties. Yet Prince Harry claims that he's being singled out and he's been treated differently, but this is very untrue because this does appear to be the standard practice, as we saw Prince Andrew, for example, losing his taxpayer-funded security back in 2019 when he stepped down from his royal duties. And then you have some working royals who, even though they do still work and do still fulfill some royal duties, they also don't get around-the-clock taxpayer-funded security, which is what Harry is asking for, or rather is demanding. The only people who really get this are the royals who are at the top of the hierarchy. Those are the only people who get all around the clock security funded by taxpayers. And Harry thinks he should still be entitled to that, even though he's not a working royal, and all the other non-working royals also don't get that. Yet he's claiming that he's being singled out and treated unfairly. He claims he's being singled out for inferior treatment, I think were his words. And it's also not the case that he's been completely stripped of his security, because the court have decided that Harry's security will be decided on a case-by-case basis if it's going to be funded by taxpayers. So what they'll basically do is they will sometimes give him the security in certain situations, but they won't give it to him all the time, as and when he wishes, to use as he pleases. Because that's basically what he wants, and that's not what he's gotten. And so because he's not having it on his terms, he's declared that he's being singled out and treated unfairly. Harry just does not want to pay for his own security. He wants us to pay for it instead. The interviewer even says to Harry multiple times, like, are you sure it's not because you're no longer working royal that you're no longer being given this level of security at the taxpayer's expense? And Harry just completely dismisses that and is like, you know, whether I'm a working royal or not, because of who I am, I'm still very much in danger, and so therefore the UK taxpayers should pay for me.
And you reject it not because you're no longer a working royal.
Sorry?
And you reject that it has nothing to do with the fact that you're no longer a working royal.
Whether I have an official role or not is irrelevant to the security needs that I would need. Let me rephrase that.
Sure.
Whether I have an official role or not is irrelevant to the threats, risks, and impact
This is the equivalent of someone quitting their job and then going back and being like, hey, you didn't pay me last month. And they're like, well, yeah, because you no longer work here. You're no longer a member of staff, so you're not on payroll. And then they're like, okay, but even if I'm not a member of staff, I still have bills to pay. And it's like, okay, unfortunately, you cannot have your cake and eat it too. If you want to have the privileges, because it's not a right, it's a privilege to have this. Although Harry, for some reason, is talking about it as though it's a right. He doesn't seem to grasp the concept that it's actually a privilege that he decided to give up when he decided to step down. He views it and talks about it as though it's literally a human right that he's being denied of. It's a human right to have other people pay for your stuff, apparently. But what he doesn't seem to understand is that if he wants to have this privilege, he has to do the things that come with the privilege, such as fulfilling royal duties and being a working royal. Because that is the only reason why the royal family members that I mentioned before still have this privilege. It's because of the fact that they are still fulfilling their royal duties and they're still serving the country. Whereas Harry and Meghan are no longer serving the country in any meaningful way. And so as a result, they've lost some of those privileges. That is unfortunately what comes with choosing to step away from your responsibilities. But Harry seems to want to have the privileges without the responsibilities. I mean, I don't doubt that, being such a high profile person and a member of the royal family, and, there are some people who don't like them very much. I'm sure that there must be some threats that they receive or some really horrible comments or some kind of online threats mainly is probably what they get a lot of. But personally, I think the amount of danger him and his family are actually in is very overstated. I highly, highly doubt that anyone really truly wants to harm them or truly wants to do anything to them. And Harry within the interview even says himself that he's come back to the UK several times, whether it's for charity events or court cases or to go to funerals. He's come here several times without any security at all. So no taxpayer funded security, no security that he's paid for himself, and he's had no issues. And the interviewer even points this out and says, well, you've come to the UK, you've said yourself you've come to the UK multiple times and you've had no real issues. So why do you have a fear for your family if there isn't any real danger, that you yourself have experienced? And that's when he just goes back to re-illustrating the point that he made before, which is just because of the very person that he is, just because of who he is, his profile, it inherently puts him in danger. And so therefore he's not willing to bring his children here or his family here. I don't even think Meghan even wants to come back to the UK, to be entirely honest with you. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if she's kind of using this whole, oh, they're not going to give a security thing as an excuse to not come back. I don't think they're in that much danger, personally. I think the most that would happen if they came back is maybe some people would say some negative things to them. I don't think they're in any real danger of being harmed though. I think he's overstating the amount of harm he's actually in. I just think he's a bit paranoid, if I'm being entirely honest. And fair enough, maybe he has his reasons for being paranoid, but that doesn't mean that we should have to pay for you. So, because the question is not, should Harry have safety or should Harry have security? That's not the question being addressed here. The question is who should pay for it? Because the courts, they're not saying that Harry shouldn't have any safety or shouldn't have any security. They're just saying that the taxpayers shouldn't pay for it. That's really what this whole court case is about. Whereas Harry's trying to make it seem as though the courts are trying to deny him of his safety or try and deny him of his security. But no, they're just saying that we shouldn't have to pay for it. He should have to pay for it himself. Unless, of course, he's asked to come here by the king. And because in those situations, if he's invited to come to the UK for an event or to come and see his family or something like that, then in that situation, they would give him security. They would give him taxpayer funded security. In my opinion, in the interview, he just comes across as completely out of touch. You're not going to serve the country in any meaningful way. You should not be entitled to the country's money. With all due respect, we are already being taxed into the ground, okay? I don't think any of us are welcoming extra expenditures on royal family members. Harry tries to downplay how much his security would cost because he says that there's a lot of tabloids who are trying to inflate the figures of how much it would actually cost to cover his security.
With regard to the taxpayer part of it, I don't need to go into detail of how much the royal family costs or how much protection costs or whatever. What I will say is that some of the British tabloid press did a very good job in campaigning to have our security removed by quoting figures such as £20 million, right? And through this disclosure process, I've seen constituents in the UK write to their MP saying, as a taxpayer, I don't want to pay for Meghan and Harry's security at this cost. They're literally quoting headlines from British newspapers. Those figures are obviously grossly exaggerated by about 18, 19 times. And further to that, if you know that other people are being protected, people that have made a choice for public office, then why wouldn't you be comfortable, happy with someone in my position who's given 35 years service to his country, 2 tours of Afghanistan, and the threats and risks to my life? I was born into this position. I was born into those risks, and they've only increased over time, along with my marriage to Meghan. And the frenzy across media, mainstream media and social media that created.
And all I can think when I hear that is, well, if you think it's such a small amount, pay it. If it's such an insignificant amount, then pay it. I really can't see anyone sympathizing with Harry in this situation, because I feel like the main people who have sympathized with him up until this point are the Republican types who already don't really like the monarchy or the royal family. Like, they don't really agree with the concept of it. They think it's outdated and they would like to just get rid of it altogether. They already disagree with the fact that their money goes to the royals in the first place. So I can't see those people agreeing with the idea of their money going to Harry, so I don't think he's going to get a lot of support from that side. And then the other side are people who like the monarchy, like the royal family. I can't see them also supporting Harry in this one either, because they probably don't approve of how he's behaved towards his family. I also found it really bizarre when he said it's impossible for him to come back to the UK because of this. To me, that's sulking. Harry is essentially throwing a tantrum because he's essentially saying if he doesn't get his own way, he's not coming back to the UK with his children. And in the process of doing so, he's essentially denying his father of the opportunity to see his grandchildren during a time when he's battling cancer. So you would think that under the current circumstances, considering his father's health, that he would just let it go and just fund his own security and try to reconnect his family and allow his children to see their grandfather. Because I do think he's really going to regret this. Harry seems to be very stubborn on this whole entire situation. He's not budging. He expects everybody else to budge for him instead. And, like I said, and like the interviewer said herself, you've said yourself, you've been back multiple times, nothing's ever happened. So there's no reason why you can't bring your children back. But to be fair, I suppose I understand it. With your children, you are a lot more cautious and a lot more careful than you would be, say, with yourself. So I can see why he'd feel comfortable travelling without security for himself, but he wouldn't do the same for his children. But again, he can just fund his own security. But he doesn't want to do that because I guess for him it's about the principle. I do think it's disappointing that Harry still hasn't learned anything from this whole experience and hasn't learned anything from the blowback of the docuseries and stuff, because he's still choosing to air out family grievances by telling the BBC that his father's not speaking to him.
This current situation that has been ongoing for 5 years with regard to human life and safety is the sticking point. It is the only thing that's left. Of course, some members of my family will never forgive me for writing a book. Of course, they will never forgive me for lots of things. But, there is. I would love reconciliation with my family. There's no point in continuing to fight anymore. As I said, life is precious. I don't know how much longer my father has. He won't speak to me because of this security stuff.
I can see why, from the King's perspective, why he would probably be quite upset with him saying stuff like that. So it's okay, so you're going to deny me of seeing my grandchildren while I'm battling cancer, and I would really like to see them because, cancer is it's a horrible thing for anyone to go through, and the last thing you want is to not be able to see your family members, especially grandparents love their grandkids, okay? I can see this even with my own parents. There's a different type of love you have for your grandchildren. And so for someone to be battling cancer and being denied of seeing the other set of grandchildren that he has, who he barely sees anyway because they're all the way across the world, I can understand why someone would be upset with that, because you're battling cancer. You want to be around your family and you want to see your grandbabies, and you're being denied, and Harry's denying him of that because of the fact that he's not getting what he wants. with this whole security thing. And so, yeah, I can understand why he'd be giving him the cold shoulder, because Harry is essentially just being a spoiled brat at the moment. I personally don't think that Harry has the same level of sociopathy as his wife, and so I don't believe he has the ability to just cut off family members and friends and feel absolutely nothing about it. So I do definitely think that he is going to regret this. He says within the interview as well that he would like to reconcile with his family. And again, I think that just comes down to the fact that, you know, what I just said, I don't think he's built like Meghan. I really think that losing his family bothers him a lot more than he probably thought it would. However, the problem with Harry is that because he thinks he's the one who's being wronged, he expects them to extend the olive branch to him and come to him for the reconciliation because, you know, obviously he's the victim. Duh. Like, hello. Obviously he's a victim. So this is the problem with the victim complex. It makes you so blind to your own flaws and your own issues, and you just have to blame everyone else for your problems, and in the process you end up destroying your own life. But because you're completely oblivious to the fact that you're causing the destruction, you end up just being miserable about it because you don't know where to start in terms of fixing it because you don't think you're responsible. So you're just walking around blaming everybody else when the only person who really has the power to change anything is you. But because you don't believe that, because you're the victim and everything's happening to you rather than you doing anything, you never actually get around to fixing things until you have the self-awareness to realize, oh, okay, I actually played a role in this self-destruction situation, and so I need to change me in order to change my outcomes. But overall, I think it's so disappointing to watch Harry fall from grace. Harry went from being the second most popular royal, second to only the Queen herself, might I add. He went from being the second most popular royal to what he's become today. And it's a very, very sad thing to watch. He went from being respected to now being viewed as just an entitled, spoiled, bratty, whingy prince who has basically decided to throw his family under the bus and is willing to air out all their dirty laundry and their grievances to whoever's willing to pay him, essentially. It's just not a good look. It doesn't paint him as someone who understands the concept of loyalty, and it also just makes him seem extremely immature. Like he just does not know how to handle situations in an adult way. He's behaving very, very childlike. He's throwing a tantrum. Pretty much. This is a tantrum. And I guess maybe this is just the consequence of being raised with that much privilege. You know, when you're raised with such an abundance of privilege and you're so used to being given so many things, you start to forget that these are privileges and you start to think that they're human rights, essentially. And so when they're stripped from you and you have to live like a normal person, that seems like discrimination and it seems like an attack. You know, how dare you make me live like a normal person? It's outrageous. But I think Harry needs to remember that when he and Meghan decided that they wanted to step down from their royal duties and decided to step away from their responsibilities as royals, they also said that they wanted to be financially independent, and financially independent people pay for their own stuff. But anyway, I would like to know what you think about all of this. Do you agree with the court's decision, or do you disagree with it and actually think that Harry should be entitled to taxpayer-funded security? I would love to know why, if that is your position, because please help me understand that one. But that is all for me today. If you've enjoyed this video, you may as well like and subscribe. Thank you so much for giving me your time today, and I will see you in my next video.